Okay, moving on. We did case study number 1. We have 2 more case studies I want to do. I want to just give you a very brief kind of overview of what we should be thinking, where we've come, where we're going as we do this. So I just want to spend just a couple minutes going back through. I want to keep hitting back on the fact that what we're doing now when we develop intervention plans is no different than what we did school-wide PBS, for those of you who are school-wide PBS schools. When we did our school-wide PBS, we said, who, what, when, where, why will problems occur? And we said stuff like hallways at noon outside the cafeteria with our 5th graders. And then we said, what's the simplest thing we could do? And we talked about rules, routines, and arrangements. What's the rule for the hallway? And what kind of routines could we set up in the hallway that would make it more likely kids would do what we asked? And how many kids could be there at one time and still make this work? And where should I be standing? And all of those issues. Then we said, how do we make sure that when we put this in place, everybody's doing it? And when we see the kids doing it right, we say thanks. And we see them doing it wrong, we correct it. How do we make sure the whole school does that? And how will we know if it's working? So we collect our office referral data to feed back into, what are we predicting now? That's PBS. What we're doing now is exactly the same thing, except we're talking about one kid. The first question is, what's predictable? That's FBA. When will they do that? Where will they do that? What will they do there? And why will they do it? That's FBA. Oh, this kid will have problems during independent reading times when the teacher asks them to do this. And they do it because they get this. They get away from that. Okay, well, if that's the case, then what's the simplest thing we could do? And then we say, okay, rules, routines, arrangements. What are we going to teach that kid to do that's a functional equivalent? What's the good replacement behavior? How can we make that happen with good antecedent manipulations? Change the routines, change the structures, change what you say, change when you say it. Where should they be sitting? What kind of arrangements do we need? And then we think about consequences. And then the next thing is, how do we make sure that this plan is actually put into place? A great plan on paper doesn't do anybody any good. How do you put it in practice? When we put it in practice, how do we make sure all the people that are involved do the same thing? That they do it the same way every day? How do we make sure we get that consistency? And how will we know if it's working? We've got to collect some data on that kid. So whether you're at school-wide, somewhere in the middle, or down in individual kids, these same 4 steps are there. These are the PBS steps. And doing stuff with individual kids is no different. It's the same 4 steps. FBA involves all 4 of these things we've been talking about. The prediction is the assessment part. This is the intervention part. This is the fidelity part. And this is the evaluation. So is it all there? Now, again, remember that when we're doing FBA, we're all the way down here. FBA is what we do when nothing else has worked. Yeah, it would be great if we're thinking functionally way back there, and I think we should be. But we don't actually get like we're doing right now, where we're saying, you need to call a meeting. Who should come to the meeting? What do they need to bring? We're not doing that until we get down to here. The systems that we have in place for school-wide should help us with this by saying, the first thing you should ask when you see a kid who's failing in any way is, are things okay with that kid? Is there something obvious? A mother just died. Okay, well, if you go in and do a double check and say, a mother just died, then that's where I would focus my attention right now. I would bring counselors and social workers in. I wouldn't do anything else. That's where we need to focus. The other thing that double check should ask us to do is there an obvious cultural issue here? Is there something that's not clicking between teacher and kid? Those are the very first things we do. They're very informal. You think about them. You should ask yourself, is there something going on with that kid? If not, then we ask these 2 questions. Is classroom management in place? Got to say this. The best intervention plan you can do will not work if there's no classroom management in place. It'll just blow up. So, do we have management of the classroom? If you don't, that's what we need to focus on right now. Changing teacher behavior. Second question that goes right in line with that is, can that kid do the things you're asking him or her to do? If they're in algebra class and they can't add or subtract, they are going to fail and no behavior plan is going to stop it. So are we asking of them something that they can reasonably do? Is it developmentally appropriate? Do we have structures for management in place? When we talk about kids that get group stuff or individual stuff, we are talking about kids for whom we have said these things are not the issue. You should never be doing FBAs on kids when you still believe this is the issue, because your FBAs won't work when this stuff is still there. This is where we focus first. So again, as we go through these next two cases, I want you to continue to consider the idea that we are dealing with kids for whom all of this stuff was in place correctly and it still didn't work. That's why we're doing the team thing. We aren't doing this team thing on every kid whose name appears before us sometime in the year. It's only when these other things are out of there. So you remember check-in, check-out, social skills training, those kind of things. The other thing I want to remind you of is when we talk about structures, charts, how will you develop chains? I asked that question. I want you to remember that this is one of the tricks we have for developing chains. It's called the pathway. You fill in the boxes in the pathway and it tells you what your chains are. What are the things that tend to always happen right before? What's the behavior? What tends to happen right after? There's your chain. It shows the chain. And what this is supposed to do is say, then what's the replacement behavior they could have that would get the same thing? It helps you think through. So this is another one of those structures you could use when you're in that team and people are talking about things. How do you put it in a visual format to show it back to them and say, this is what you've just said? Does that make sense? This is what you said. And get them to look at it and say, yeah, I guess that is what we said. That's one of the things. The ABC chart is another. But this one I found to be a really good way of summarizing the ABC chart in a way that gets people right on the verge of saying, okay, now what do we do next? Jumping them right into, well, what would get them the same thing? Lastly, when we do move on to intervention, there are always 4 components to intervention. 5 if you count function. Once we determine what the function is, we have 4 things to do. 1, figure out what you're going to tell that kid to do instead of what they're doing. Hey, instead of punching people in the face, hey, instead of spitting on us, hey, instead of refusing to do that and yelling, hey, instead of, we want you to do this functionally equivalent replacement behavior. And it's something that we can teach. Then we facilitate success with antecedents, structures, routines, prompts, cues, reminders, pre-correction, tying a string around their finger. What is it going to take? Having them sit right in front of me, having me stand by them all the time, having them have a peer tutor, having them what? What's it going to take? Then we have to, as part of our intervention plan, say, what will we do when they do what we want? And that thing has to give them the same thing that we said here. So if you said the function is to get teacher attention, then we're going to ask, what should we do when that kid does the right thing? The answer is already there. It's whatever function said. So this kid does that to get peer attention. What would you like him to do instead? We'd like him to get his work done, blah, blah, blah. And then the question I'd have is, how will that help him get peer attention? Oh, right. We've got to make sure that when he does that, the end result is peer attention, or escapes from some work, or gets my attention, or gets to be first on the computer. What is it he wants? What was the function? And the last one is, make sure that when they do the wrong thing, they don't get that. That's all the intervention you need at that bottom level. You don't need to throw them in timeout necessarily. You don't need to hit them over the head with something. The basic principle here is, what are they getting by doing the wrong thing? You have to make sure that when they do the wrong thing, they can't get that, which is generally pretty straightforward. It starts to get more tricky when it's they get some sort of an internal thing. When we deal with kids with lower functioning and kids with autism especially, you'll get kids that will self-stimulate. They can filter light or just tap themselves or something. If they're being reinforced by that, it's a lot harder to say, when they do the wrong thing, we're not going to let them have stimulation. That's the function. So what we have to do is we have to preempt them from doing those things. The other one that's tricky is they do it for peer attention. How do you control peer attention? If they say the right thing, it's really hard for you to keep everybody from laughing. And if you try, what they're going to do is, I'd better make it even worse next time. So somehow you've got to control the group in order to control what happens after they behave. And that's when we typically go to things like group contingencies. Basically we say, I can't control it, but I can overpower it. So what I'm going to do is, why do you think these guys laugh when I say something really stupid, really disgusting and raunchy in the class? Why do the students laugh? It's funny. What do you you're a student. Remember yourself being back in junior high. And I come in the room, and we're supposed to be working. You're supposed to be writing. You're supposed to be reading. And I come in the room, and I yell out, horrible, ugly thing. What's the teacher going to do? Teacher's going to come over and say something to me. Why is that amusing to you? Yeah, it's a great show. Hey, I'd rather watch this than do this writing. So when I see someone disrupt the classroom, it's funny. It's reinforcing to me. I want to reinforce. Hey, let's laugh because I'd like to see that again tomorrow. That's what's happening. So what we have to do is we have to give the rest of the classroom a different reinforcer. Hey, if I hear nobody in here laughing at anything inappropriate all day long, we all get, now I'm conflicted. He's doing something pretty stupid over there that I like. Although if I laugh, then I miss out on something. I'm going to go this way because I want. So how do you change the environment to make what you need to have happen? That's the hardest part, I think, of the entire plan. All the rest of it's really straightforward. What do we want him to do? Raise his hand, we'll go over and give him attention. That's not the hard part. The hard part is, what do you do when he doesn't? And if all you do is say, well, I'm going to hit him really hard, or I'll throw him out of the class, it won't stop it. Hitting him probably would stop it, but it's illegal, unethical, and as soon as you and your hit go away, the behavior will come right back. So it doesn't last. So let's find a teaching solution. Oh, so thinking of those things, I want you to look at vignette number 2. Allison. So the top part is the vignette that was real. The bottom part is what I've added to give us a springboard to jump off to the next thing. So I'd like you to read this whole thing, and then I want you to answer these questions. Assume that the hypothesis I've given you at the bottom is correct. Bottom here, the hypothesis that the function of Allison's behavior is to access adult attention. Assume that that is legit. That's really what it is. Then I want you to answer these questions using the form that you have from Illinois, the one that looks, behavior intervention plan, looks like this. I want you to go through that, and I want you to just answer the questions and think out, what do we want Allison to do instead? When will we teach that? How will we teach it? Do we need to teach her how to do it, or just when and where? What kinds of things can we put in place ahead of time to keep that from happening? What are the contingencies, which means when she does it right, what will we do? And when she does it wrong, what will we do? And what would be a really simple way to gather some data on Allison wherever it is that she needs this gathered? If it's a classroom, a playground, wherever. What would be your suggestion for the simple way we might collect that? What I'd like you to do is to spend some time talking about that. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and spend about 15 minutes talking about it.
The form is the second to last page of the packet.
Okay. Second to last page. Spend some time thinking about it. We're going to come back and discuss as a group, and then we're going to do another one after this. So, go. Not a real kid in terms of what you're thinking, so what you come up with is kind of dependent upon how you see this kid, and you're probably building this kid off of your experiences with similar kids. So I wouldn't expect that you will all have exactly the same thing. What I would like to do, though, is to kind of go through and get some examples from each of you about the kind of things we selected and even why we thought that was the right thing at that point for these people. So start with replacement behavior for Allison. What did you select for? Here's what we'd like Allison to do under these conditions.
We said to decide on a sign that you would use to request help.
Okay, so I like that one. We would like to give her a sign to use that means I need help. And when she wants attention from the teacher, when she wants assistance, when she wants help, she uses the sign. Well, how is that functional? If we come over there when she uses it, it's functional. If we don't come over when she uses it, it's not functional and she will never use it. So that has implications for things that we do down here. That's a good one, though. Others? So that's what everybody here had.
Instead of a sign, we just had, it said that she really likes the color blue, so we had a blue card that she could just hold up a blue card. It's the same kind
So
of
same idea. We're going to give her an appropriate way of saying, I need attention. Okay.
We thought maybe we could set a visual timer or something and then just give her the attention every 2 minutes or 5 minutes.
Okay, so that goes under, that's not a replacement behavior for her. That's what we're doing. So we are going to do this. What are we teaching her to do? Okay, so then that's what you're teaching. And it's not wrong, it's just different. So what you're saying is, we're going to do this, and when we do that, we want her to demonstrate whatever it is you want her to demonstrate. So it's important that a lot of times when you do see replacement behavior, you'll see people say, we're going to do this and this and this. And remember, that's really a question. What we're going to do is dependent upon what we want the kid to do first. What else we got? Okay, everybody else has exactly the same things again. Okay.
Appropriate stimulating things, so like we were talking about when she's 12, but it's like a rice table and like rain sticks as opposed to stimulating for fighting and...
Okay, so you actually are identifying, and this did also, a second function. Now the team has said primary function is to gain attention from adults, but there was evidence in the little write-up that she also has some self-stimulatory behavior. So another thing we could do is we could get her as replacement behavior, use appropriate manipulatives appropriately, and that would be a replacement for these other things. So what we'd have to teach her is when to use them, how to use them, et cetera, and then we'd put them out at the appropriate time and remind her and those things. Yeah, that would be for that other function that was there and wasn't, either the team decided that wasn't relevant or decided it was secondary to the other things, which is probably more the case. Anything else?
We talked about having her point to pictures or photographs of either food that she wanted, a person she wanted, whether it be a teacher or an aide, or the bathroom, something that she wanted to be able to either point to or hold up.
Okay, so that's slightly different from yours because this one, instead of just saying I need help, she needs to identify what she wants. So within a limited range, there are these pictures and she has to point to, it's not just now, it's this now, right? So it's a little bit more complicated a skill. So then the question becomes, can she do it? And we don't really know her. But if she can do that, that's preferable to the other one because it's a more complicated thing. And you'd like her to do the most complicated thing she's capable of doing. In other words, we don't want to go to a real simple behavior if she's capable of doing a whole bunch more. So part of that depends on what she is capable of doing, but that's a great one. Anything else? How will we teach this? Let's go first of all with either the sign or the blue card. Okay, so let's say we're going to start this tomorrow. And Maureen sitting next to you is Allison, teacher. Okay, so you're literally going to go in and grab her hand and talk to her and show her how. Perfect. That's what it is. Let's say she's higher functioning. Let's say she knows what it is, what it means. Now what's it going to look like?
More repetitive, give her more opportunities to practice the skill until she's mastered it.
All right, so it would be like teaching a kid any other skill that you know they're capable of doing, to just say, hey, Allison, here's what we're looking for. Here's what we want. For instance, let's say you were working on your math and you wanted me to come over and help you. What could you do? You could do your sign, put up your card, and I'll come over. Show me how you do that. Practice that with me. That would be more like the way we could do it when we've got a kid who's a little higher functioning. But as we go down, if we're talking about that lower functioning, then the instruction is really that hand over hand, that guided physical prompt.
Or if the child is even lower, you have to go into shaping.
Absolutely. Which means we're going to have to do approximations, gross approximations possibly even, just to get them to learn the simple behavior of raising a blue card. Part of that is, I think, when you're doing something that's with a real low functioning kid and blue card is an abstract thing for them, it's almost as if you have to trick them into doing it in some way. You know, get them to put a card in their hand and then run over there. Just from how they have a card, or put it on their desk and run over there because it's on their desk. And you shape them to think that you've got to get them to see that blue card has something to do with it. Then once they get the blue card's got something to do with it, then you can start manipulating that, shaping it into something. But exactly right. Any other teaching issues for Allison?
Depending on what her functioning level is, we have a lot of kids who are really using both of these social stories, teachers and social stories.
Okay, so can you give me an example of a social story that might work with, I don't mean the whole story, but how to do that with Allison?
Just basically do it in usually first or third person, and you actually set a situation up in a social story where Allison wants the teacher's attention. Allison shows the sign to teacher will come to Allison. So we have some kids who are really into books and not so much language, but to keep it short and show pictures of her in the book and the teacher in the book.
So would you just do that with pictures, or would you have another child act it out with you ever?
Well, that's just one
Right.
way of teaching it. I mean, certainly have another child, but you just have the one.
So as long as Allison is watching this little demonstration and she's just a passive observer, but she's hearing, seeing what's happening, and then you try to then transfer that back to her actually being an actor in it. Okay?
How putting the blue doll into it. Maybe she's not comfortable role-playing with a bunch of students, but she needs to be accustomed to this doll, kind of putting it onto the doll and showing it.
Excellent. You look through the assessment and you say, is there anything in here we have to play with? There's something to play with, something she's comfortable with, something that's her security blanket. Let's use that as part of our thing because we know she's comfortable with that. So I think it's great to look back and see what do we know is here that we can use to help.
Well, or even the people that she's had positive interactions with, you know, if the teacher
Right.
isn't the one that she maybe wants, if they're not getting along or whatever, you know, kind of relationship, there's a couple people that do have that good interaction with her, so maybe they can be used as the...
You know, one of our basic tenets of any instruction is you want the kid to be successful with that instruction the very first time we ever do it, ever. So how do you arrange the environment to make that lesson so that they'll be successful the first time? And so I'm always thinking ahead, what could screw this up? And I'm thinking, she doesn't like her very well right now. Who does she like? That's the person who we should get to go do the instruction because that first day has to work. And, you know, again, it's shaping how low do we have to make that first day skill in order to make sure they can do it. So I think looking ahead to all those things is really important. What about antecedent manipulations? So you've taught her. Now, whether you did it hand over hand or social story or however you did it, you now believe she gets it. So today we're going to put it in place and we're going to hope that she does it the right way. What kinds of things can you do in the environment that will raise the probability of her actually doing it?
You could leave her alone for a minute and not do her one-on-one. See if you could set it up so that she needs to use it to get attention.
Okay. Yes. What can you do to raise the probability that she'll do it the right way when she wants attention?
Have her do it in the afternoon when she's more likely to do it.
Okay, so set it up in the time when you know it's going to happen. But then, again, she's got two choices, the right way or the wrong way. What can we do to manipulate the environment so that it's more likely she'll do the right way?
Pre-correct?
Pre-correct. Prompts. Again, I would ask this question. If I said to you, I'll give you $10,000 if she does that in the next 5 minutes, what would you do? You'd find a way to make her do it. Okay? That's what we got to be thinking of. You have a...
We had just talked about finding out what it is in the afternoon, or what it is with the first two teachers that seems to work, as opposed to what happened in the morning with the third teacher.
Right, and it's incomplete information on our functional assessment, and we don't have enough information. But let's assume that we figured out it's just an afternoon thing, not a teacher-teacher thing. We could try that, too. But it's also a good example of antecedent manipulation. Maybe we could just switch the routine around. She seems to be better able to do things in the morning, and this seems to be something she's less likely to want to do. Why don't we put that when she's more likely to do it? And, you know, it's a great antecedent manipulation because it's really simple.
Depending on her level, you can do all the stuff like put the blue smiley face on her desk, take it down, you put it up on the board, you wear a button, you do everything you could to make blue and smiley face be a good thing, and, you know.
So you just...
For the first week while she's learning to
set it up.
Everyone would have blue and happy.
Blue and happy. You know, I think the thing that we've got going for us as humans is language. And it's the best manipulation we've got. It's so out there in your face, and, you know, it's that pre-correct. It's every day when we enter those situations where this has been a problem, I'm going to say it 1,000 times. Remember your blue card if you need anything. Remember your signal if you need. Remember. I keep walking by, every time I walk by going, remember, if you need. Don't let her fail. So keep it in her mind. Just keep it in her mind. Keep it in her mind until she finally does it. And when she does it, what do we need to do? Run, screaming to her and say, yes, thank you so much for doing it the right way. So we've got to create situations where she's going to do it. What other kinds of antecedent things anybody come up with? Anybody think about seating her right in front of me so I see her? Or a lot of times that's not possible, but then it's how can I walk around the room but stay really close to her at the same time?
And I think when I was reading it, it seems like it was a teacher and a whole bunch of aides. So it seems like if the teacher was busy working with someone, then maybe
Right.
someone could always be really in close proximity.
So what we need to do is organize ourselves so that as we move, there's always one person that's going to be here while we are moving. So nobody ever leaves that area.
And depending on whose attention she likes, if she just likes all of the attention, then everybody could have their scheduled time that they work with her so that she's not burnt out because she's stuck with Sue Ann all day and she really wants to work with Bobby Joe. And
Right.
Bobby Joe is working with Timmy, you know, so if maybe they weren't specifically one-to-one assigned aides, that they could be on a rotation schedule and then she could.
It's actually better instruction to have multiple people doing it. Because if you only have one person do it, you're likely to get restricted generalization, where she thinks that person will do it, instead of it's working with everybody, so now I know it's something I can use in other places. So, good thing to think about.
What about teaching everybody in the class?
Sure. a lot of the things that we do for one kid also work for everybody else. What do we get out of having everybody else do it and not just her? Modeling, vicarious reinforcement. Hey, it worked for them. So, yes, anything that you can make work for the classroom and an individual student, even better. Now, some things don't lend themselves to everybody, and some things do. So, it just depends on where you are and what you're doing. Pretty obvious with Allison what we're going to do when she does it the right way. What are you going to do when she does it the wrong way? What does she want you to do? What kind of attention would she like? Any. She would like you to be there. So, I don't think it's possible, or if it's possible, I don't think it's likely you'd want to give absolutely no attention when she does that, because you're probably going to get, she's got some behaviors that are pretty inappropriate. If we totally ignore, don't we just set her up to escalate? So, she starts having these misbehaviors, what would you do?
Remind her about the blue card.
Remind her again. Don't go over there and say, boy, we need to have a long talk about you remembering this. That's what she wants. But somehow you've got to give her the signal. Maybe you've got a blue card and you pull it out, but don't go over there. So we've got to figure out a way to let her know that's not going to work, but if all you do is ignore it, she's going to go, well, that's just not big enough yet. I'll start doing some of these other fun things that I've been doing. That'll work. And we don't want her to think that way. We want her to think that way. So when she makes the error, we've got to push her that way without giving her the attention she wants. If you had to measure this, think of yourself as the classroom teacher, and we say, I want you to go back to your classroom and I want you to measure. What are you measuring? How often she uses the blue? How often she makes her signal? So think back to what we talked about last time. What's the appropriate thing to use if she's sometimes using it, sometimes not? Out of blank opportunities, right. So I would consider any time she's inappropriate, a missed opportunity to raise that card. Anytime she raises the card, an opportunity taken advantage of. So all I do again is tape on the forearm, a plus for the card or the sign, and a 0 for trying to get my attention in another way. And at the end of the day, divide the pluses by all the pluses and zeros together, and you've got percent of opportunities to do it the right way that she took advantage of. All you've got to do is do that 1 or 2 days in the classroom, and then you can say, right now we're at 50%. What do you want? We'd like 80. All right? Then let's set our goal. We're going to meet again in a month. You're going to do this. 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 We're going to meet and we're going to see if we're at 80. If we are, we keep going. If we're not, we rethink whether this is working. So I would always say, what's the simplest way? I like that one because it's simple. I can put a piece of tape on my forearm and I can go and do whatever I was doing. Okay. Questions about Allison or any other comments about Allison? Then let's move on to number 3. Andre. Once again, we've got some real information from Andre, and then I've made some up to find a function for him. So I've just made one up. Let's again assume that my function is the correct one. Same thing we just did. Same exact process. The only difference here is we've got a different kid, a kid with a different type of function. So I'd like you to go back through and do the same thing you just did, but do it for Andre. What would you think if we're saying Andre has these problems when confronted with a task that he thinks is unpleasant? So anything he doesn't feel like he wants to do, he does this, and he gets away from it. why not just cut to the chase and say, let's never give him something unpleasant to do? What's wrong with that logic? Two things. One, impossible. Two, you're not teaching him anything when you do that. You're just avoiding it. It's exactly the same as saying, Andre's bad at math. Let's not teach math anymore. It isn't doing anybody any good. So instead we have to say, what do you want him to do instead when he's confronted with something he doesn't really want to do? Now this is a difficult one because he doesn't want to do something difficult. So when he is confronted with something difficult, we want him to do something that is difficult, which means, so how's this going to work? So we would like, when this is all fixed, we say, Andre, do this thing you hate. And we'd like him to go, alrighty, no problem. So that ain't going to happen tomorrow. We're going to have to do some shaping. Where should we start?
I had some questions that we wanted answered before we move to replacement behavior. We want to know, why is he avoiding it? Because he's avoiding it because he just doesn't like to do it, or it is too hard and he needs help to do it? Is it sort of the can't do or won't do situation?
Let's assume,
Because that's different. You're going to go different.
whether we're, legit or not, let's assume that we've gone down our pathway to get here, which means we believe he's capable.
Okay.
This isn't an academic issue, not a classroom management issue, not a cultural issue, not a...
And because of the
Right.
ADD, it's not that he's missing the directive and that he's responding this way because he didn't see what was happening.
That may potentially need to be factored into our antecedent part. What would you like him to do, though, when we do give a direction to do something? What's he capable of doing tomorrow?
Instead of being aggressive, we'd like him to say, no, thank you, I'd rather not do this right now.
Okay, so for right now, is there just a better way? Okay, that's one possibility is, we understand sometimes you don't want to do something. There is a way, though, to express that doesn't include hitting people, scratching people, etc.
If possible, instead of now that making a choice of when to do it or how to do it.
Okay, so we're going to go down, you're taking a step down, which is okay. You went down to here and said, how could we make it more likely that he would do what we're asking him to do? And you're saying, well, one of the things we might do is saying, hey, Andre, instead of, hey, Andre, do this, we say, hey, Andre, which one do you want to do? This one or this one? And we offer him this illusion of choice, if nothing else. So what do you want him to do when we offer him a choice? Pick one and do it. So basically our replacement here is do it. The part that we don't know yet is how much should he do? How will he, what does he want? To not have to do something that's not fun. How will he avoid doing something that's not fun by doing something that's not fun? Okay, but let's say our class lasts an hour. It's going to take me an hour to do this. So here are my options right now. I could say, no, hit you, scratch, do a bunch of stuff, and have you, and even the parents say, they leave him alone when he does that. He gets too out of control, you just got to leave him alone, which is, he's getting right what he wants. Or I could do all this work for the whole hour. Why would I do the work? Okay, so let's think, do it. Maybe it's another innocent manipulation as we find other ways for him to complete this. You've got a choice, and here are some other ways that could be completed.
Got to make it worthwhile to do it. Got to find some sort of carrot at the end of it.
Okay, we're going to have to go down here and say, what kind of carrot do you use? And before you go off to anything else, remember, what was function? Avoid. There's your carrot. So you got to start thinking, how can I trade him? You do some work, I give you some time off.
Or after we get this done, there won't be anything else to do.
Okay, so that might work with him. That would not work with a kid like Allison because she would just self-stem during that time. A kid like him, you might be able to say, if you don't get it done, there's nothing else you will do. Although, when we confront him like that in the past, it was met with, right, so we might just be setting that up. So let's say we want him to do something. Instead of do it, we're going to say do something. How much something?
We don't know.
We don't know yet. How will we know?
Figure it out.
What he's doing.
What's he doing right now? How much is he doing right now when you ask him to do these things? Let's say during the average day you ask him to do 7 things that he doesn't really want to do. How many of them does he do? None. Okay, then what if he could do 1 of them tomorrow? And what if he could just do part of 1 of them? If he could do 10% of 1 thing tomorrow, are we better off than we were yesterday? That's the way you got to think. Build that stairway. Right now he's right here. We want him to be up here. Remember we built that stairway? What's on step number 1? That's what you got to think. That's when we start saying, okay, then here's what we teach him. Tomorrow we teach him that if he'll do this much of 1 thing, it's cool. He's successful with that, we make a big deal, we reinforce him verbally, etc., and then what do we do? That's great, you were able to do this much. Tomorrow, if you do this much, you can get the same thing. Run the whole thing, get it going. That was amazing. That's great that you could do that. I want to keep doing this. So tomorrow, if you get this much done, you get it again. And we keep pushing him, and we keep shaping him all the way up to where we want him to be. Now, if you've got a kid that has 8 different tasks that he or she hates, and they do 0 of it now, and you're going to build up this much at a time with 1, how long will this take? A long time. So at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to make bigger jumps. I would get him really successful with 1 of those. Then you can start thinking about, how can I use the success I have here to take bigger jumps or do 2 things at once, but you've got to get that initial success before you try all the other ones. If you try to do it all at once, it's just going to blow up. So you've got to prioritize which one would make the biggest difference. So what about teaching? Andre is 7, right? He performs at grade level for most subjects, so he's there with us. What are we going to teach? This is how to say yes, Andre. He knows how to say yes. This is how to say I will. This is, let's go back to what Sherry said. What do we need to teach him first? How to say no appropriately. Because we're only asking him to do 1 of 7 things. What should he be doing on the other 6? You know, hey, as long as you do this one, it's okay to scratch me on all the others. We're not saying that. So what we're saying is, we want you to do all of this one. On the other ones, we want you to do this. And so we've got another replacement behavior. It was that one. And we're going to have to teach him. Here's what you need to do. So what's that look like for a 7-year-old? You're going to sit down and tell them, here's what I want you to do. Was the social story work for that one? How about the sit right down, look him right in the eye, and tell him? Does that work? It's worth a try. He's 7, and he's at grade level. That's, I think, with some examples and practice a little bit, that's probably reasonable. Well, it's simple, so it's worth a try. What antecedent manipulations do you got for him?
One is to take it off of the interpreter to manage his behavior and put it on the teacher to manage the behavior of when he's paying attention, and also reward him for paying attention, but also the other students in the classroom for paying attention appropriately.
Yes. That is a skill that we want everybody to have, not just him, right? I don't know that it was always just on the interpreter, but it seems to be interpreter heavy for some reason. And we're kind of running into the same issue we ran into with Allison. We're kind of trying to take all the burden off the teacher. It really should be a shared thing. I think, and not just the interpreter. So that would make sense to me that we would say he needs to have the same message no matter what adult is there, not just the interpreter. So how do we make sure that message can be delivered in a way that he'll understand every time? What else do we have for antecedents?
Maybe help him or teach him how to use an interpreter correctly.
So maybe part of our instruction needs to be how you and your interpreter should interact to do these things. So here's what you should be doing, looking for, listening to. Here's what your interpreter is going to do. So we're kind of teaching him about what that manipulation is going to be. Good. Let's just go back to this simple. I'll give you $10,000 if he does it right tomorrow. What are you going to do?
Make sure he does. Make sure he does it right.
Okay, so you go over and say, hey, Andre, this is the one. I need you to get this part done, which means you need to get one problem done. I've already done a little bit by saying, this is the one. You only need to get one of them done. I've said a couple of things. What else would you add to that statement to remind him that this is important? If you get this done, there's where you dangle out the carrot and say, remember, it's this simple. You get what you want if you do this simple thing. So let him know. Keep reminding him all the time. Wow, all you have to do is this much and you get that? That's pretty cool. Just keep that verbal part. Remember, our advantage with humans is that we can do that.
Well, for antecedents, we already talked about controlled choices, which is really a good one. Some of the ADHD kids, before we actually sit and do seat work, sometimes we ask them to do a little bit of heavy work or a walk. So we take them for a walk, so they do a little heavy work, and then they come back and they sit down. So we can kind of set some of those things up as antecedents.
Another thing that fits into a kid like this is behavior momentum, where you've got this thing you know he doesn't really like to do. So what we should be doing right before we ask him to do that thing is 3 or 4 really simple things that we can reinforce him really big for. Wow, thanks so much for following directions on that. You are awesome. You are great. Get him to do 2 or 3 simple things before you introduce that. It makes it a little more likely we get some compliance. So, good things. Others?
Talk about maybe when you have kind of like a safe escape place. Maybe there's a water fountain in the room. Maybe there's a corner. Maybe he likes to go sharpen his pencil, where he's just when he's ready to like just lash out. You stand up in your spot, you go to that place, you take your deep breath, and you come back and sit down and do one thought. So an escape is not I'm not going to do it, but at least I'm out of the thoughts.
It's another replacement behavior. You do this. If that doesn't work for you, then here's what you would do second. So it's first, say no. If that doesn't seem to be working, before you hit or anything like that, the next thing we'd want you to do is go to this place. We'd have to teach them how and when and why to do that. That'd be a part of that replacement behavior. What will we do if we say do this and he starts scratching at us? What does he want? He wants to be left alone. So should we just get in his face and make fun of him for the rest of the day? What we've got to do is don't allow him to have uninterrupted free time. You might need to stand next to him. You might need to do other. You can't just walk away, though. If he gets violent, you can't just walk away and let him be totally alone. You've got to have something in place. Even if it means we might have to move him to a place where another teacher can stand there. But you can't, every time he does that and we just leave him alone for fear of being hurt, we've reinforced the problem. And that's why this has gotten to the point where it has already. His parents are saying at home, well, anytime he gets mad, we just leave him alone because he's going to, well, they're reinforcing problem behavior. And if that's been going on for a long time, we have got to break that now. And that's what really, I think, makes this a really challenging kid. That alone right there. Because like I said, that's always the hardest part. What are you going to do when they do it wrong?
I also think as a parent of an 8-year-old ADHD child, just because they're looking straight at you doesn't mean that they're listening to you. So it's really important to say, now you tell me,
Right.
What did I just say? If I do this, then I get to do this. Okay, that's when I know that he's really hurt me.
The antecedent is pre-correction. So what do you need? You tell him and then say, so what is it you need to be thinking? What will you get if you Make them tell you back, because you're right. Looking at you and listening aren't necessarily the same thing.
If you have to, I mean, I believe positive, so they always are working for something, you know, that reinforce their menu that, you know, if they follow the directions or whatever it is your hard behavior is, but there comes a time sometimes that response cost has to come into play and you can use that as part of your consequence.
If you've got a kid like an Andre, where the reinforcers are something that's really hard to deliver because you have to wait for him to do something specific to pull something away, that's the kind of kid where something like a token economy starts to make sense, because it allows you to give and take much more frequently than just those opportunities. So, yeah, then you can say, great job, you earn more of these, and these are worth something that you can buy all kinds of free time with, or we can reel those back in. So I might not be able to control the fact that you're getting free time right now by sitting there doing nothing, but I can control that there are even bigger free times that you're not going to be able to access because you're not going to have the points for it. You've got to kind of create your own free times. What about the measure? This can only be measured by the opportunity thing, because we have to do something in order for him to have an opportunity to behave. In other words, if I never ask him to do anything, he's going to have 0 problems every day. So I have to standardize my measure by saying, what percentage of the times I asked did he do it right? Which means you can only do it with that opportunity thing. And like we talked about last time I was here, I try to convert lots of things into opportunity-driven things because it gives me control of when I collect data. I'm not going to collect data until I ask a question. That way, I know right when I have to do it. So it makes it simple. Very quickly, I want to summarize. These are the things we've talked about. 1, FBA is both an assessment and an intervention. We focused primarily on assessment this morning, intervention this afternoon. FBA is both. One or the other, not sufficient. Good FBAs involve a range of persons and perspectives. We could have dug really deep into issues with both Andre and Allison about family issues and other things that we didn't, because we just said, team already did that. But if we were the team, we would have done that. Replacement behaviors must be based on function. If it's not functional, it won't work. That's why we do an FBA. If you're not going to do an FBA, then you're just taking a guess at what might work or what might make it worse. All interventions have to be taught and facilitated and evaluated. So these are recommendations for doing FBAs based on the things we know. 1, develop a group of people at your school who know how to do this. A small group of people that can do this. So you've got people who can lead the process when it needs to happen in your school. Then you invite other people as needed on a student-by-student basis. Hey, you've been elected to do the next FBA. You'll invite the people. You're one of the people who knows how. You'll invite other people based upon what you read in that little case. Use some sort of structure. You've got your form. You got my form. You can get the facts. You've got the ABC forms. You got the pathways. Use some sort of structure to help organize what it is you're doing while you go through. Get consensus on the decisions. Just like, because kids aren't necessarily listening when you're sitting there talking in their face, neither are adults. So we just said we're going to do this with kids. Everybody heard that, and everybody here thinks that's okay, right? You're all going to do that. Because there's some people going to go, wait, what did you guys say we're going to do? I'm not going to do that. We have to get them all on it. Evaluate the plan and evaluate FBAs as a whole in your school. Use that checklist that I gave you or something else to once in a while take a look and see. Are we as a school, are we as a district, are we as a whatever, generally creating FBAs that make sense? Not the Rolls Royce, but are you generally doing the important things on that if you were to look and evaluate your school, etc.? Questions about the things we've covered today? Never any questions at the end because people want to leave. All right, well, thank you again for all your patience and all the times I've been here. I really appreciate it. This has been helpful for me. Sherry continues to say to me, could you do something like this? That's something I've never done before, like this, and it's really helpful for me to think about. I've gotten a lot out of being able to try different things. So again, thank you all. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to email me, and I'd be happy to get back to you with whatever you need.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Would you be able to email me this PowerPoint?
Yes, I'll send you the whole thing.
PowerPoint. Please fill out your evaluation. The system is written for both teachers and social workers. You will all need to forward my signature because